r/AskReddit. To all the people out there who work as carers in haunted houses, what was your best scare reaction? My wife and I host our own haunted house. Mostly the front entrance, however we go all out. Projections of lights, lots of decorations. The first year we bought our house, we didn't realize it was 100+ kids minimum, rain or shine. The owners before us moved down the street and don't really do much, so I'm sure we came out of nowhere with our setup. My wife was dressed as a witch with a reactive green makeup on her face, with a large witch hat. It was totally accidental, but when asked truck or treat, some clever kids chose trick. My wife figured out that if she looked upwind straight at the kids, the of light would light up het makeup super bright, since the large black brim of her hat was blocking the of light above her. That would give some quite a shock, instantly asking how she did that, it running and laughing. I was dressed as the Grim Reaper. The customer was excellent and hiding me, with lots of blackout bits and bones on the gloves and face etc. At the start of the night we would start out with me opening the door and essentially filling the entire doorway. Then I would back up slowly after my wife triggers the smoke machine. Then my wife would pull her bit. Kids generally loved it, and as time went by, the older kids were out, and I'd up my scare game. Our doorbell rang, and this girl about 10 to 12 in a full ballerina getup was at the door. I slowly opened the door, while slowly opening it, and I jumped out from behind it. She screamed bloody murder, turned and ran full steam off our property and down the street. Her mom was on the sidewalk, laughing herself breathless. Wheezing, she had to call her daughter back, again barely able to catch her breath, she was laughing so hard. She made her take her picture with us, and told us we were the best she's ever seen. Full of compliments lol. So I worked as a scare actor at a haunt on an old aircraft carrier from WWII for a couple of years. There were two parts to the haunt, one below deck in what was called sick bay, which was mainly the ship itself being old and creepy. Up top was the more traditional Halloween haunt maze with themed rooms and chainsaw guys. Normally I worked in sick bay, but that night I was put in the maze. I was in the bathroom themed room and was the victim of the deranged plumber actor. So I'm sprawled out on the floor, and when people walk by, I lunge and groan and beg for help. It worked pretty well. Then this one woman came in wearing high heels. I don't know who wears high heels to a haunted house on an aircraft carrier, but hey, you do you. Anyway, she doesn't see me on the ground and manages to step on my arm with her heels. I know we had strict rules about not touching the patrons, but due to the pain/surprise, I wasn't thinking, and I grabbed her ankle in hopes to get her off me. This lady screamed and bolted for the emergency exit hallway that would take her out of the haunt, leaving her friend behind and dumbfounded. I felt terrible at the time that she missed out on the rest of the haunt, but now I laugh about it because I really scared her. Different haunt for Valentine's Day in a defunct mall. It was set up in a vacant department store, and my room had one of those pillars with a mirror on it. The room was set up like a bedroom, with an actual 4-poster bed. There was ample room to hide behind the pillar and jump out at people, and people expected this. I'd often see people think they were being clever and trying to get the drop on me. I, however, was lying on top of the canopy for the 4-poster bed. There was a wooden board up there strong enough to support me and keep me out of sight. They'd fail to find anyone behind the pillar, turn, and then I lunged at them from the canopy and they'd scream. I really loved that job. I worked for a rather popular haunted house/hayride/cornfield. It's made the Travel Channel shows a few times. So my now husband and I were supposed to be dead cowfolk in a Wild West scene. The way it was set up is a PPL walk in through a big opening in the front. There are 2 buildings on either side where 2 actors should set off the scene. After that, the PPL walk around a stable-like fenced-off enclosure which put them in this narrow-ish corridor where I and my husband were. I was on a barrel, he was lying under the fence. From there, the area would open up just a little with a blacksmith. The dude was actually a blacksmith. He'd spend the night making cool shit, and we'd warm up by the fire. While we waited for groups, there was an emergency exit that was part of the scenery. The firing thing, I can't remember what it's called lol sorry, and then the entrance to the mineshaft. The entire walkthrough was maybe 40 feet. Oh, and it was always really dark. Our main source of light was the fire from the blacksmith and nearby hayride. Other than that, we had a few very dimly lit light bulbs. So one night, we were doing our thing, scaring people and whatnot, when this kid comes booking it through the scene. He's all alone and just fucking terrified. I mentioned the emergency exit BC. If someone ever said I can't do this, I want out, we'd have to exit character, the only time we were allowed to, and escort them out. So this kid is hauling ass. IDK if he got separated from his group and was trying to find them, or if he said fuck this and wanted to just hurry out or what, but he gave us about a second to try to scare him as he flashed past us. Well, the ground was uneven, and I think a little damp, and he slipped and fell and slid to a stop against a barrel right by the exit door. My husband and I are like, oh shit. We walk over to him, and he's lying on the ground, panting hard, staring up at us with sheer terror in his eyes. I'm like, for real, dude, not playing. Are you okay? And he quickly nods, eyes still bugging out, and looking between us. I'm like, you sure? Do you need to leave? He takes a second, looks at us again, and shakes his head. I look at my husband, and then back at this kid and scream, then get up, and get the hell out. Get out. Get out. Get out. That kid jumped up, like he had rockets strapped to his back, and fucking hauled ass into the mineshaft, leaving me and my husband rolling. Good times. I was once playing a prisoner in a sort of scary game experience here in the Netherlands, known as Prison Escape. Not wearing scary macup, just a prison jumpsuit and slightly exaggerated bad female hooker macup. I was mostly supposed to blend into the participants, who all got the same jumpsuit. Only my behavior and weird hooker macup made me stand out as an actor. It's sort of role-playing live-action gamma play for adults only with some haunted house mixed in. Participants had to sign waivers up the wazoo to get in, and got a SAF award for if you wanted the game to stop and get out of the prison immediately. It was set inside an actual former prison that closed, so it was huge in there, and 100% realistic. It's a 3-hour experience where up to 100 people at one time can participate. Some of the prisoners and all of the guards are actors. It's a huge production. Participants get booked in, locked in a cell for a bit, then get let loose into the prison itself. There were various ways to escape, including through winning the prison soccer match with a team, answering a question for a corrupt guard, bribing a fellow prisoner, another role I sometimes played. You could also get out by going into the doctor's office, and if you did it right he smuggled you out in a body bag and into an actual old-fashioned ambulance. I myself was assigned to go out through the church. I followed the insane preacher, a fellow actor of course, when he rang the bell for mass. There were only a handful out of the 100 participants who came to the church room with me and the preacher actor. The preacher opened a trapdoor under the altar and led us into the tunnels underneath the prison to get outside, but in those tunnels were cages where they kept the supposed insane prisoners. Like extreme isolation basically. There were more special actors in there who were playing prisoners in cages and torn up uniforms, screaming to be let out, rattling the bars. Some had macup to make them look emaciated, but mostly the shouting and the ambience made them scary. One participant was a younger guy who was in our little group following the preacher, and he got super freaked out and just sat down at the entrance of the tunnel crying. Going on and a hell no. The preacher stopped walking, came back and asked the guy if he wanted to use the SAF award. Guy said no. Then the preacher just picked him up and started dragging the guy to an empty cage and opened the cage and nearly pushed the guy in, but instead basically lifted the dude off the ground against the bars and whispered, if you pull a weak stunt like that again I will lock you in a cage with one of these lunatics. The prisoner actors in the cages started hollering for the guy's blood and the poor dude looked so freaked out and nearly ready to wet himself but powered through. We kept walking through the tunnels for a few minutes until we got outside, and then we had to run from the big searchlight and go under a fence to escape the grounds. It was insane every night. Definitely one of the more scary escapes of the prison escape. My junior college had a tradition where we would organize night walks for our freshmen during their orientation camps. It's something like Halloween scare houses, but usually it's held in school compounds and our school is quite huge, so walking from one end to the other in a night walk can take 45 minutes per participant. So anyway, the first night walk I organized was out of campus, at an outdoor campsite. Our night walk was held in a mangrove park complete with raised wooden walkways, so you won't need to step into the mud. In other words, you're limited to walking only on these wooden paths, or else you'll fall into the mud. The whole park was known to be haunted too, so the mangrove walk definitely has its own atmosphere. It was a full moon night too, so there was visibility, but the surrounding trees blocked off most of the light. So I wasn't part of the original actors for the night walk. I was one of the main coordinators for the camp, so I didn't have time to prep this. But I wanted to have some fun, and I was done with the stuff I had to do, so I decided to join in halfway. I dressed myself entirely in black shoes, pants, hoodie. I hid myself at the end of a station, in the dark corner, and when the pair of participants walked past me, I would nonchalantly stand up and start following them around like a creepy shadow stalker until their next station, which was more than a 100 meters walk away on a straight path. When the pair, usually a guy and girl, and would hold hands cause the girl would be so scared, noticed me, they would stop and freak out. I follow suit. And then they would continue walking onwards, and so would I. Towards the end of the walk, I would start creeping closer and closer until I catch up with them. Then I would walk between the pair and try to break their holding of hands. This usually freaks the girls out, and some of the guys too. I would then stop a few meters in front of them, and they would be forced to walk past me, since that's the only way forward, or else walk in the mud. By then they'd be super freaked out, especially at 1 AM in the morning, that sometimes I'd have to step aside to let them pass, so they can carry one. It doesn't sound as scary as evil clowns or zombie jump scares, but I did a survey afterwards for which is the scariest ghost. Many said the guy in black was the scariest cause he kept following you for a long while, even though you knew he was there the whole time. You would think he was going to do something to you. The suspense was the scariest cause it lingers around the most. Some people thought it was a real ghost that followed them around cause I wasn't an official station, so the facilitators at the end didn't know what I did, or that there was an impromptu actor there and I popped in halfway, so not everyone managed to experience it. Like some real ghost or something. Only some people had experiences of what I did. Reactions were so wild. I repeated this again at the next year's night walk to similar responses. Not in a haunted house, but volunteered for a local youth group. We have this smallish forest near our town with a trail snaking through it, and a rickety lookout tower at the top of the hill. At one point, there is a stagnant pond lake with a narrow bridge over it. I was positioned in front of the bridge, so I brought a blue overall and a bag made of sackcloth, along with a lot of straw. I basically wore the overall and filled it with straw, modified the bag so I could look through it, etc. I then tied a noose and hung myself in such a way that I could sit on my knees, like I was just a mannequin. For context, the kids are all in their teens, so the boy groups would try to be macho before the haunt and impress the girls. I get some groups and the outfit works wonders. Most groups suppose I'm in fact a mannequin. No skin was visible, but eventually scare shitless. This was when I got the group with the oldest guys, 16 to 17. They approach and see my outline in the darkness. At first they start calling out names of the volunteers to see if I'd bite. Then they threw some small pebbles. I remained silent and motionless. Now this really creeps them out, because I can hear them talk to each other about who I'd be and that I was a mannequin for sure. Still, they do not want to pass onto the bridge behind me and instead elect someone to take a closer look. The dude comes up slowly, expecting a scare, relaxes a bit and then crouches to look through the sack. As he's inches away from my face, I give my most inhuman shriek possible. The group literally jumps and books it the other way, with their friend falling flat on his ass and running back with them. Of course, when we returned to the campfire later, they denied being scared. I have worked on haunted houses for the past 5 years. Last year I fully ran and designed one that was all volunteer based, where the money would be donated to charity. I have a lot of stories. A couple of my favorites. This is one happened in 2014. I was a demented doctor who specializes in electroshock therapy. I had some crackling poppers, a boomstick that made a very loud bang, and occasionally a victim and her baby. One day during the week I decided to purchase one of those plasma balls from Spencer's Gifts, since it fit with my theme. The first day I got to use it, I had a great idea. My first two victims were a burly dude who had the look haunters know well. You won't scare me, no matter what you do. Well, I start my routine as the couple walk through my room. When I get a bright idea, I beckon for the guy to touch my plasma ball as I'm hiding my boomstick behind the barrier. The guy touches it and crack. It sounds like the thing exploded on him, and he backs up running into the wall. He looks very scared and surprised. His girlfriend starts laughing at him, and I turn my internal laughter into a maniacal laugh and say in my haunt voice, think like black metal vocals, 1.21 gigawatts of pure power. They then scurry out of my room like cockroaches. This next story happened in 2016. I had a very similar character to 2014, and this is the only time in all 5 years that I broke character in front of a guest. This group of coked out people come up to my area, and I do my routine. I throw my victim's baby and sacrifice it to Satan. Then the most coked out of them makes her way to the back of my room, where I'm there to interact with her. She puts up her fists in a fighting stance, but she's 3 feet away due to a half-height maze wall barrier. I back up just a tad bit, so I'm out of range, and continue my routine. It's at this moment I realized I made a mistake. She lifts her leg up and kicks me in the face. I had no injuries or bleeding. It barely touched me because I was mostly out of range. I break character and say to her extremely firmly that you can't do that. She seemed genuinely confused on why she couldn't kick a haunted house actor. I got on the radio that I had and called for the guy running it to let everyone know of her behind me and have our security police officer detain her at the end. One of my favorite lines that I say in my haunted voice, Satan needs more sacrifices for his meat wagon, always gets great reaction out of my fellow haunters. They always tell me after a scare that they want to laugh every time guests walk through when I say it. Those who I still do other volunteer work bring up my line all the time. I have a lot of other great haunted house stories, like the time myself and 4 other actors covered 3 paintball fields full of all of our outdoor haunted house by ourselves. I've got a few, but I'll tell my favorite. In one particular part of the haunt, we have a room decorated as a morgue. In the center of it is a table where our female victim would lay while the mortician would choke, stab, or beat her as she screamed and played it up and all that. Typical victim horror stuff. In order to move through this room and to the next, the groups had to move in front of and then past the spinning table, giving them a real close up to the splash zone of the violence and gore and extract more intense reactions. Well, my victim had to go to the bathroom between groups, so she snuck out the secret exit, and I brought in the backup cadaver dummy we keep off to the side for cases like this. Problem with this is, it's a dummy that looks like it's been cut open and its entrails spewed out, which means my act of choking my victim would look awkward. Choking a clearly dead subject doesn't look scary. It looks stupid as hell. So I take a page from one of our other workers who likes to climb things and decide to go for a zombie doctor act. I slam the body on the table and get up onto the table. I start digging in the chest cavity and growl and act like I'm feasting on its insides, and I'm getting some really good reactions. Sweet. Perfect. This is working really well. Gonna use this act more often. Here's the thing. Remember how I said this table spins? Remember how these people have to get really close to move through the scene? Well, after 5 or so groups I rinse and repeat, throwing the body onto the table and going ham on its entrails, and one woman got very freaked out by the sight of it. Normally they run away. Not this woman. She runs full sprint towards me, shoves the table, knocks me off balance, and I go tumbling onto the floor. Hard. It's a slight miracle I didn't hit my head on the open mortuary door on the way down, because it was very close. Let's add some real blood to the mess, shall we? So I'm on the floor, in pain, pretty sure I've busted my ankle or my knee and possibly have a concussion, and I hear the people laughing. I know I failed, because you can't laugh in a haunt. That's against the rules. So I use the pain to fuel my rage and crawl on the floor. The hurt leg really sold the zombie motif into the group and started swiping and biting at their legs. I didn't actually bite them, but it really sold the bit, and I'm told by the other workers in the next 3 rooms they didn't stop running until they were forced to buy the chainsaws. I won Monster of the Night for my performance. TL. Doctor, I jumped on a spinning table and got body checked by a woman and almost died. Bit and snatched at their ankles from the floor to sell my performance. Edit. Leg was fine. No concussion. Oh my god, there are so many good ones. I'll just tell one story though. I was working at a haunted theme park for 3 years. Well, this was my last year there, and I was determined to make every scare count. Well, I was in a haunted themed after a motel, and I was put in the kitchen area, second room F the haunt. They had me in the wall up on a platform, so I was above one of the fridges. I had a panel I pushed down up there, and I would pop out and do my thing. So, it's a Sunday night, and therefore we aren't particularly busy. A girl and her mom come walking through. They go through the first room and then come to the kitchen. I wait until they are right in front of me and then drop my panel hard and say something. Don't remember what it was. The girl screams her head off and is clinging to her mother, who had done nothing more than flinch. Her mom starts telling her to let her go, it's not that bad. The girl would not let her go and also would not move. They were just standing there. Well, I didn't want to cause a clog, so I started to tell her to get moving and yada yada. Now, each haunt had a few fire exits, and there was one right in the hallway after my room. If people go through them, it's not normally a problem, but this particular fire exit just lead to the back of the haunt, and it was blocked off on both sides, so you were just stuck back there with a whole lot of garbage and building materials. This girl starts trying to through there, and I start stopping her, and she is just screaming it every time I talk. Her mom also tries explaining it to her. I get an idea. I sigh and say something along the lines of, well, since you won't listen, I guess I will have to help you. Then I start to climb down from the fridge, scaring her more. She kept saying nan, while her mom just kinda laughed and encouraged me. Just then, our head security guy walks in holding a little box of mini muffins. They fed us and brought us water and stuff, so we didn't have to leave constantly. He stops when he sees there are people in the room and looks at me halfway off the fridge. The girl looked at him and just said, "Why is he holding muffins?" in the most terrified voice I had ever heard. Her mom finally got her through the room, leaving me and the security guy there laughing our asses off. Oh man. Okay, so this is actually my reaction from Universal Horror Nights several years ago. I've mentioned it a few times on here, but enjoy. First time I've ever been to Horror Nights, my boyfriend, now husband, tells me the best thing to do if I'm scared is to just babble at the actors and say random shit like they are my friends. So we are going through one of the houses and an actor jumps out at me, and my panicked brain is going, okay, just say something, it's fine. And what comes out of my mouth at top volume is, but first let me take a selfie, and then I basically sprinted away. Maybe 30 seconds later I look behind me, and my boyfriend is fucking dying of laughter. I figured it was at me, so when we finally got out I was like, WTF, you told me to do that. Why are you laughing at me? And that is the point at which he told me that the actor who had jumped out at me had quietly broken character, pouted and said fuck your selfie when he thought no one could hear him. Still my husband's favorite story to tell, despite happening almost 6 years ago. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.